Um, Hi, I'm seeing some friendly faces in the chat. Hi, friends. Cool. Well, would love to kind of, start and chat a little bit about interactive email today. Yeah, how's everybody doing? Or how's the morning going so far? Amazing. Yay. Cool. So many friends in the chat. I'm super excited. Awesome. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen. Let's see if this works. Do. See some evening folks here. Okay, cool. Oh man. All right. I'm hoping this is working. Cool. I'm gonna go ahead and share now. Cool. So today I'm going to be talking about the magic of interactive email and walking through a couple of code examples to kind of just explain a little bit about how interactive email works and the nuances of it. And, this is sort of meant to be actually a little bit less of a super technical talk than maybe some of the other ones. So if you're a less technical person as well, I'm hoping there's something in this for you. And yeah, would love to start out by kind of introducing myself. So I'm Akshaya. I'm the founder here at Spellbound. And for those of you that don't know, Spellbound is an interactive email platform that plugs into your ESP to create interactive experiences. And a little bit about my background is, I'm actually pretty new to email. I got into email sort of, on the brand side of things and just was sending so many emails to my audiences and realizing just how powerful the channel was and felt like it was really, really underutilized and had so much more potential. So I'm kind of obsessed with how can we make emails better and more engaging and interactive and interesting for consumers. And that's kind of how I ended up here. And one of the kind of major problems when I was sending emails on the brand side of things was realizing that there was still so much churn coming from people who saw my emails. And what ended up happening was, I was sending like weekly newsletters and product emails, notification emails for my last company. And unfortunately, a lot of those emails were just kind of getting lost in consumers' inboxes, right? People get hundreds of emails every day now. And so when they see an email from my brand, I wanted them to be able to click on that and come back to my site. But oftentimes they would get busy and they would forget, or maybe they were on their phone and they knew how annoying it was to switch apps and leave their Gmail inbox and go back to a browser, and they would just never click at all. And so the goal was I wanted to eliminate as many steps of friction as possible to get the user to a point where they can immediately take action. And interactive email ended up kind of being a win-win situation for solving some of the problems that I faced when I was sending a bunch of emails for that brand. And the win-win was that, well, on the consumer side of things, because consumers are so busy, they're looking for really fast, easy ways to improve their user experience in any product that they're using. And this was exactly that. Using an interactive email, I could actually get the consumer to be immediately engaged and give me some feedback on how they were, experiencing our product, whether that meant they would start shopping for something, or they could answer a question about my product, or they could even start using my product within that email. That meant that they were just saving a bit of time and they could do it a lot faster. Now, it's also a win for the brand because on the brand side of things, as especially, over time with all these, competing emails in their inboxes, brands are struggling with decreasing, engagement, decreasing open rates, decreasing click-through rates, and especially with Apple privacy protection, now we have even less data on what's actually going on in these inboxes. And so we want to figure out how to get our audience more engaged and still know if they actually are engaged and get data on it. So it makes a ton of sense that interactive email kind of can sometimes be helpful to bridge the gap between brands and consumers and really create a more engaging experience. So today, you've probably actually seen an interactive email in the wild. So Google Docs has had interactive emails live for actually a few years. So if you've ever seen a Google Docs email where you've had to like respond to a comment, you've actually probably already interacted with one before. And these are getting way more common, especially in the past couple of years. So it is a little bit more of a recent tech, but I'd say that they're picking up steam pretty quickly. But what you might not have seen is just how much interactive emails can do and what kind of the capabilities are at the edges of the functionality. So this is a little bit of what a shoppable email could look like. So for some of you that are working in e-commerce or, working within Klaviyo or similar ESPs, This is something that actually Spellbound works with our brands to be able to do, which is a fully shoppable interactive email. So we can do add to cart, checkout, look at products and things like that. And today our live coding example is actually going to be a subset of this shoppable email. So we'll be looking to figure out how we can get that image carousel where you can swipe through images. We'll be able to do that together. Cool. So wanted to show a few other examples. So another really great example of interactive emails is just quick surveys and trying to ping people on getting their feedback about your product, which can be really, really important for collecting more of that really rich zero-party data that you can use to enrich your CRM, get more information about your customer. And what that really means is it means better personalization. And I think what people oftentimes forget is that you can't really have great personalization if you don't have the data to personalize based off of. And so using interactive emails to collect that data on your audience can be a really great way to have more information that you can use for segmentation, for personalization, and really make sure that everybody is receiving the content that they care about. This is actually an example that you also might have seen in the wild. So Google has been experimenting with a ton of these recently. And so an example of an interactive email here with the shopping features was for the Google Pixel Buds as well as Google Pixel. And again, you see here that they're using that image carousel that I was talking about. So we're going to work together on implementing that today, and you'll see how to get that arrow that can basically switch images in an email. They actually did a bunch of other cool ones here too. So they had like a click to erase, like almost like a fake image editor in the email, which I thought was really, really unique because it's sort of like explaining one of the features of their product. Cool. And I think this is my last one. The last example is actually for meeting scheduling. So especially for those of you that are in the B2B SaaS space or you're doing more sales oriented emails, it can be super helpful to just like save somebody a bit of time and get them to start booking a meeting with you without having to like open a new tab. And I don't know, God knows I have like 150 tabs. So it's it's really hard for me to keep track of them. And I often forget. So I'm sure it really goes a long way when you can save that person a bit of time and just get them to start booking with you faster. Cool. You might be thinking at this point, like, whoa, these examples look really cool, but like, why should I care? Like, why is this so important? Is this really worth investing my time and my energy? And as email marketers and developers, we're all super duper busy. So why is this something that we should even, look into pursuing and exploring? And really the goal is, and we have our favorite Naomi here featured. And really the goal is we actually want to see more performance, right? Like we care about people actually engaging with our emails. And that's exactly why this is so important. So when it comes to like the number of people who actually engage with an email, we've seen really, really incredible lift in the engagement rate. So for example, we did a webinar registration campaign and I think Naomi actually received that email. And that email did 80% better than the static version when it came to registration. So we're not even measuring click-through rate. We're measuring submission rate. Like how many people are fully registered and fully submitting the experience in that email. And that it was 80% higher when it was an interactive email versus when it was a static email. So when seeing that kind of data, it's really clear that interactive emails really do kind of make the experience faster and easier. And people do want to engage with your emails, especially if you're sending to an active and engaged list of people and you're not sending to anybody who opted out or anything. They want to hear from you. That's why they subscribed. So the easier that you can make it for them to actually respond to you, that's kind of exactly when you see more of that engagement. So that was one example. We also have done various Spellbound emails that are product review emails. So similar to a survey where you're actually embedding things like, how did you like this product, or what, any feedback that you have for us. And we saw 2.8 times more product reviews. That's like I don't even know how to do, is that like 380% or 280%? I'm not a math person. So convert that to percent if you can. But 2.8 times more reviews than sort of the static version, which is clearly a pretty significant lift on the number of reviews that came in. And now at this point, like hopefully I've gotten you convinced that interactive emails are super duper cool and they clearly have value in a really great, a highly optimized email marketing stack. But now you may be wondering, how does the magic happen? What is this sorcery, and how can we do the same thing for our emails? And interactive email works in many different ways, and it comes in a few different forms. The major two forms that I'm going to focus on and that we focus on at Spellbound are interactive HTML emails and interactive emails via AMP for email. And I can kind of explain a little bit of the drawbacks and the differences between the two. So first, let's start with HTML interactive emails. Now, with HTML interactive emails, you are going to still have all the same limitations of the normal email development that you're doing today. So that means that you won't be able to use any fancy JavaScript or anything. You are going to be completely limited to just HTML and CSS. But you might be pretty surprised to realize that even that shoppable email that I sent, that I showed the very first example where customers were able to add to cart and look through product images, that email actually looks exactly the same in Apple Mail using just an interactive HTML. So it is very much possible to create very rich and very functional emails without even using anything like AMP. However, you are going to have certain limitations. For example, you are going to need to be very careful about email targeting because interactive HTML does not work on every single email client. So as long as you're very careful about which email clients you are showing those specific components to, that'll kind of add a little bit of complexity. The other nuance about interactive HTML is if you do need to collect a user's data and have them submit information through a form, usually that form submission will need to still send them to a link where that link is actually going to be the part doing the form submission. So for both of these types of interactive email development, there will usually be some kind of backend or server component if you wanted to collect more data than just like having a carousel or something that the user can interact with. So for our live example today, we're going to actually just work on a really simple front-end example. It's just going to be that image carousel. But that's part of what our platform does is we basically take care of the backend in fully no code. So you won't actually need to build any of this yourself. That's exactly what our product does. And on the AMP for email side of things, you might have heard of AMP for email. I think it was this huge kind of like buzzword in the industry a couple of years ago, and kind of maybe fell off a little bit from like the trends, and I don't know, people stopped talking about it a little bit, which was disappointing to me. But I was so excited to learn that it's still very much alive and still has really, really amazing capabilities. So if you haven't heard of AMP for email before, it does not work in every email client, but it does work in all devices on Gmail, as well as AOL and Yahoo Mail. And it has a lot more rich functionality than interactive HTML. So you are able to do full form submissions. You can have multi-step screens or multi-step forms, and you can even pull in dynamic content. So let's say you wanted to check the weather or check a user's subscription status with you or something. You can actually ping a server and update information in the email based on that server content. So there's a lot of more functionality that you can do. What we do at Spellbound is we actually do a combination of both. So in order to cover as many email clients as we can, each email that our drag and drop builder creates includes both an AMP for email part and an interactive HTML part. So we try to bring in as much as we can together. But a couple other nuances about AMP for email is you do need to have SPF and DKIM enabled. You also need to get your domain approved by Gmail. Again, those are things that we usually do as part of our onboarding process. But if you're setting out to test it on your own, there's a couple extra steps you might need to think about as well. And within, with interactive emails, one of the other kind of major concerns that people might have is, does my ESP even support it, or do I need to switch off and find another ESP? And a pretty significant number of ESPs actually do support it. And if you're just looking to test it and develop it, Parcel does support interactive AMP for email types as well. So that's actually what we'll be using for our live coding today. But several other ESPs will use it as well, and you can basically paste your code and test it in there. Cool. I'm just checking time. Okay, we're only 15 minutes in. Sweet. So a couple of examples in sort of just general lifecycle marketing or other use cases for interactive email. I kind of already went through a few of them, but just to kind of sum it up. So one is really collecting more data for your CRM. So things like user preferences or information on your audience that you might want to store for later. Really surveys and getting feedback can be a huge one. The one I showed you earlier was with a webinar registration form. So anything where you need some really small action on the user's end to just indicate their interest in something like an RSVP could be huge. Shoppable emails are really where I see the huge kind of like revenue impact of interactive emails, when you can get somebody to start paying for things and start shopping from within their email. Image carousels are a very, very low touch one, but pretty easy and pretty amazing in terms of the engagement that you're able to see. And taking any sort of product action. So I've seen some of these in the wild as well, like the Google Docs example where you're responding to a comment. So it could also be approving a transaction or liking a post, something that's actually, immediately related to your product or your company's products. Cool. So I'll kind of pause there and maybe actually take a couple of quick questions since we're so early on time. And then I will move into kind of the live coding example. So I'm going to switch over. Amazing. Okay, cool. Let me see some questions. Cool. I see some questions about whether Spellbound is AMP-based, and we did talk about that. Spellbound is both AMP and interactive HTML, so it's a couple different versions. I am seeing, let's see. So what to do with the other 80% of your audience? Interesting. So I don't know if you're referring to kind of like the fallback or what to do if somebody cannot see the interactive HTML version. So like I said, we do cover as many email clients as we can with the interactive version. And the percentage is actually usually like a vast majority is seeing the interactive version, since we're able to include Apple Mail and some of the non-AMP clients as well. But for those email, for those email clients that were not able to show the interactive HTML or the interactive AMP for email, we actually end up showing them a fallback. And so the fallback is really simple. We'll want to basically build a version of the email that's exactly what you would normally send. So it could be an image or a link back to your site or whatever you're trying to get them to do. Just make that in the static fallback, and then you'll want to include that as well as your AMP version as well. And those people will see that version of the email instead. Amazing. Cool. And I'm looking at the questions tab to see if there are others. Why are other email clients falling back from using AMP? Man, I wish I knew. Yeah, I think more and more email clients are working on adopting AMP for email, but so far it's not a ton yet. I think it's a ton of lift probably for them to build it out, because they totally need to rebuild a lot of their functionality, but I wish more of them did it. So beats me. I'm not sure. Cool. So we have okay, to answer the question about the fallbacks. I love this one. Okay, so here's a question about, in my experience, most difficult aspect of interactive emails is discoverability, ensuring the recipient knows the email is interactive. This is a super duper interesting question. This is something we actually deal with and are constantly thinking about and trying to figure out ourselves. To answer your question, Sean, there's actually a bunch of different things that you can do. We have a whole blog post on our site that kind of walks through some ways that you can make an email really obviously interactive, but I can kind of talk to a few of them. So the first thing is, when an email is coming in via AMP for email, it will actually have a little lightning logo at the top of the email. And for a consumer who's never seen one of those before, Gmail will actually automatically show them a little pop-up that says, this email is a dynamic email. So that for the very first time is going to be a sort of like a cue for them. However, if they, maybe they've already encountered one a long time ago and they still don't understand, there are other tons of really important visual cues that you can include in your email to make it obviously interactive. So copy can be really helpful for this. So adding copy that, in your actual content of your email, whether it's in your image or in your, copy of the email, like instead of saying, click the link below to go back to our site, you'll want to say things like, use the interactive form below to indicate your interest. And we think that really helps a ton in just educating the consumer and helping them understand, hey, this email is not like our other emails, so you should pay attention to it. We also can use things like little banners or images themselves that point to the interactive portion of the email. And when we actually create by default emails from within our platform, it actually comes with a little disclaimer at the bottom saying made interactive using Spellbound. And just even communicating that, hey, this is interactive is already kind of, along the right path of making it clear that this is not your normal email. So there's a ton of different things that you can do. We also actually try our best not to include button style images or button style elements in the interactive components, because we do know that because so many emails have that same like rectangular button, but it ends up being a link. We try to actually avoid that. Instead, use things with lots of, like, we use shadows, we use text input fields, drop downs. So there's a ton of these kind of like UI elements that make it a little bit clearer that it's an interactive field and not just a normal link. Cool. I think that's basically all the questions I've got. Just checking if there's anything else in the chat. I love that. A huge arrow. I love that. Cool. I think we are pretty much, I'll just wait like another second and I'm finding that blog for you. Cool. We can move on to the interactive coding section if we're ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, sweet. And now you're getting to see how insane all my tabs are. I have so many tabs. Cool. So for today, this is a super duper simple example. We're going to be looking at image carousels. And there's actually a few ways of doing this. And just to show you that you don't need to use AMP for email for creating interactive emails, you can actually create image carousels just using pure HTML. So this is a pure HTML version of the carousel where we have these adorable little cat pictures. And you can look through and swipe those images using HTML. And then I have a version that's also using AMP for email. And these are just like literal simple examples. You can just Google around and find these examples. And as well as there's a bunch of tutorials that you can find on the AMP email website. So here's an example that uses AMP for email instead. And the AMP for email carousel does come with a bunch of nifty things. Like things like you can have the images automatically swipe through, so like on a timer, for example, and you can also have them like resize. You can have like different types of scrolling mechanisms, but for this one, we're just going to start with the very basic AMP email carousel. So I'm going to kind of walk through a little bit of what an AMP email looks like what does the structure really look like. And I can kind of, maybe after I present, I can see if I can like bundle up this code in like a link and send it in the chat as well. So no need to like be like frantically following along or anything. Cool. So first, to kind of go over what are the major components of the AMP email format, there are a bunch of sort of specific boilerplate things that you'll need to be aware of. And a lot of the things that you'll be used to doing for your normal email development may be a little bit different when you're coding using AMP for email. So for example, how you treat dark mode or how you do like tables or certain CSS properties, a lot of those things actually might be treated very differently when you're coding with AMP for email. So it will be a significant change to sort of your workflow. So let's talk about the head and sort of like what needs to go at the top of your email. So to start with, you still need to declare that it's an HTML file. And to be clear, AMP for email is still actually HTML. So when you save your files, it will still be a .html file. It's just a special type of HTML. And now this is important. So when we declare that an email is going to be using AMP for email, we need to be using HTML AMP for email or that little lightning bolt symbol for email to be clear that it is going to be an AMP email. And by the way, to preface this, I am not an email developer by trade, so please bear with me if I make any mistakes. So this is my first time doing a live coding session. Cool. So let's start with the head. So in the header tag, we are going to declare a couple of things that are unique to AMP. So the first thing that's unique to AMP is the AMP runtime. So this is going to be basically pulling in the AMP for email JavaScript to be able to tell the browser or your email client that we're going to be using AMP in this email. The next is the AMP for email boilerplate. And these two things are things that you'll just want to copy and paste. So the boilerplate, I don't really know why it's there, but it's got to be there. It's a requirement. So let's put that in our header tag. The next thing is going to be importing specific AMP for email components. So for AMP for email, in order to, I guess, like reduce the time that it takes to load a specific email, they do require you to import every single AMP element that you are using in the head. So for this email, I'm going to be working with the AMP carousel element, and that's its own component using in AMP for email. So what I'll do is I will find the script tag just for the carousel where it says custom element equals amp carousel, and I will copy paste that into my head as well so that now I can use it. So I believe if I tried to remove this, it should not work. There we go. So blank screen, not working. Cool. So now I need to import my carousel, and so now I can use it. Cool. Now, whenever you want to include CSS in your AMP emails, you will want to include a style tag, but you'll need to actually include the AMP custom attribute in your style tag. That just is another like kind of AMP specific thing that tells them, hey, this is going to be the custom CSS that I'm going to want to include. There are a few different types of limitations that you'll kind of come to, and when you're building especially more complicated AMP emails. For example, there are size limitations. Oh, what's going on? Okay. There are size limitations to the style tag, for example. There are also size limitations to the entire email and how complicated the email can get. I mean, you'll kind of see similar issues with HTML emails as well. So nothing new, but just something to be aware of. Cool. So you can see how simple this email is and already the amount of functionality that I'm able to get with it. There's almost no CSS. It's literally just a little bit of padding, and I want the images to take up all the width. So that's really it. So let's go into the body here. And in our body, I'm literally just adding this carousel element in a div. So that's the other cool thing is everything does not need to be in a table and an AMP email. You can use more like flex boxes and divs, more of that normal sort of like web style CSS that you might be familiar with. You can use some of that in AMP emails. And the AMP carousel element is actually very, very simple to use for static images. So it's quite easy to build one of these yourself. So let's say I create an AMP carousel component. I'll just want to create that component by declaring that it is an AMP carousel. And then there are a few required attributes. And if you go and look at the AMP for email documentation, you'll be able to see all the required fields for each component in AMP. So for this one, I've added the width and height. And that the width and height here actually is not a fixed width and height. It is a responsive width and height. So what I'm really declaring is I'm declaring the aspect ratio of the image. So that is something unique to AMP. Whenever you're dealing with images in AMP, they actually would like for you to declare the aspect ratio if you want it to be responsive, and then it will respond based on that ratio. So this one, I declared the aspect ratio, but I added it as a width, max width 100%. So I am still able to, resize it, and it will take up the full width. So within the AMP carousel, as children, I'm going to include all the images that I want to show in my carousel. So if I wanted to add another image, I could just go ahead and add that in here. So I'll get another one at the end, and I can kind of swipe through. So there it is. There, that image was added. I don't know if anybody has any like fun images or something that you guys want to include. If so, put it in the chat, and I can swap my images. So those images will be in here. So layout equals responsive is an important element to basically be exactly what I said, where the aspect ratio is going to define the responsiveness of the image. Type equals slides just means that you're going to be able to swipe through these slides. And controls means that you will be able to see these little arrows. And these arrows, I believe, are actually customizable with a bit of CSS wrangling. There is a selector to be able to change what these arrows look like. So you can make them circles, you can make them white or red or blue or whatever. Cool. And then the AMP image, like I said, is a little bit different from a normal HTML image, but I'm just going to include those in here. Again, I need to set the aspect ratio using width and height, and of course, alt text so that we're able to improve accessibility. Cool. All right. So now we have our full carousel in here, and I actually want to go through and even send the test and make sure that it works. So lucky enough, Parcel does include the AMP MIME type in Parcel. So you would just need to like use your little AMP tab on Parcel, and you can edit the AMP email. And then when you click send test, you will probably need to whitelist this email. I think there was another email that was already approved, but you may need to whitelist it. And I'll actually walk through what the whitelisting process looks like too. So I'm going to copy and paste this email because that's where my test will come from. I'll click send test, and then I'm going to click send, and I'm going to send this to myself. Cool. And then once I go into my Gmail, I want to go into my Gmail settings to whitelist this email address, click developer settings. Oh, and I've already whitelisted it. So in here, I'll be able to edit my dynamic email developer settings, click save, and now that email address is going to show the AMP emails. So this is where I mentioned there is that verification process. So if you aren't just doing this for testing and you actually want to send a real live email to a real audience, you'll either want to work with a provider like Spellbound that can help you with that verification process, or you can go through it yourself. It just requires basically filling out a form as well as sending a few AMP emails to those verification emails that are requesting it. So you can read more about that on the AMP for email docs as well, what that process entails. Cool. So let's take a look at this email and see if it worked. And there it is. I got my test. There's my carousel. And if I swipe through, it is perfectly working. Awesome. So we built a fully functioning AMP email in just maybe under 30 seconds. And it is also responsive. So I'm, making my browser a little smaller. I don't know if you guys can see that. And it is responding to that. So if I see on mobile, it will do exactly the same thing. Cool. I'm actually curious, and I haven't tested this, so I hope it works, but I'm curious if I switch off AMP, will it still show me that HTML interactive carousel? I actually don't think it would, but I'm just curious. We'll see. This is live testing here. So I'm going to click save. And let's see. So I'm opening it up. Oh, okay. It didn't even get switched off. My bad. Well, live testing never works. So I'm just going to hope that it works. Cool. Let me stop sharing again, and I'm going to take a look at what's going on in the chat. Cool. Lots of kittens today. Oh, I have a new URL, so I can try that one too. Sweet. So it really is very, very simple when these images are static. It does become, actually, so this does bring up a good point. So there are a bunch of things that you'll need to be aware of. Things like you do need to include HTTPS or HTTP if you're using, and for images specifically, AMP actually requires that you're using HTTPS. So they want secure images for some reason. But yeah, there's that cute kitten in there. For links, you can use HTTP or HTTPS, but you do need to have something in that front section of the link. So just a couple other nuances there. Look at that cute kitten. Love it. I'll come back into the chat. Cool. So people were asking about, is AMP free? Yep, it is free. It is an open source framework, so you can use it on your own. You do need to register to send AMP, and I think Mark, the amazing Mark, has dropped in some instructions on how to do so. Cool. Yeah, so it sounds like Avi says Gmail won't support the HTML interactive, so this is what I get for doing live testing. But there are other email clients that do, and I think there is a bunch of great resources on, I want to say, let me find it. I just don't want to get the wrong link. Oh man, I can't find it. But yeah, there are a bunch of other email clients that do support interactive HTML. Can you add links to the images? Yes, you can add links to the images. So all the same kind of functionality that you can put in a normal email. Cool. Any other questions? Oh, we have another one. Can you send a parcel link of the carousel? Is this also working on Gmail mobile? Yes, it is working on Gmail mobile. I can try to see if I can open it on my phone. I don't know if I can show you guys, but let's take a link. Let's take a look. Amazing. Okay. I'm trying my best. I don't know if you can see this. Cool. You can kind of see it. Maybe I need to turn off my background or something. But it is there. There's the carousel. And I can swipe the images. So it's working. Cool. And yes, I will send the parcel link. Actually, I might be able to do that now. I think there's a way to share. Copy link. All right, here we go. There is your parcel link. Cool. That's got all the code for the HTML one too. Amazing. Any other questions or things that we can answer? I think we zoomed past really quickly, so definitely thought this was going to take a lot longer. Thank you, Avi. Yeah, use Avi's link. So that includes the AMP version.
Well, thank you so much. That was so fun. I've always been so interested to see how one of those interactive emails is built, and you've brought many fun creations to life, which is so, so cool. If anyone has any additional questions for Akshaya, please drop them into the questions tab or the chat, whichever you prefer, questions preferably. And we have about a 25-minute break between now and Megan's session, which is the last session of the day. If you follow Megan on Twitter, you'll know that she completed the slides really quickly, hasn't been working on them last minute, not at all. So I'll put the commercial break screen up for about 25 minutes, and I will see everyone, in 20 minutes. We will reconvene. Thank you so much again, Akshaya. That was phenomenal.
Yeah, awesome. See you guys soon. Bye.